Well, as we said, the word from the angel is fulfilled, as we certainly would expect, and everybody arrived safely on shore. Now, they didn't even realize where they were until after they had all, swum aboard to shore. And when they had escaped, they then found that this island was called Malta. All right, and Malta is a fascinating place. We'll talk a little bit more about it in just a little bit, but you have to understand that when you land on an island like this, and it's full of people who are what they would call barbarians, and I'll explain that word in just a moment. Uh, you're expecting a couple of very dangerous things to happen. One, you might all be slaughtered by the natives, or two, they may take you prisoners and enslave you, and take your wives for themselves. I mean, a lot of horrible images come to their minds. Okay, yeah, so we make it to the island safely, but so what if we're all going to be slaughtered here, or become slaves to these people? You see, so a lot of question marks still in their mind. Remember, Paul has been assured that he's going to go to Rome and stand before Caesar. All right. Here's a picture, a painting of the shipwreck, and I always find it interesting to take a look at artist conceptions of things. And that's probably not too much of an exaggeration. Horrible, horrible hurricane type winds, and this is probably not too far off from what actually happened. There's another painting showing the aftermath after the storm is passing, and what is left of the ship. All right. So, just interesting to take a look at those pictures. Now, this is the southern part of the island of Malta, and it's known as St. Paul's Bay. And the little statue that you see there in the picture is actually a marker indicating where traditionally the prisoners, everybody landed. It's probably not the most accurate rendering of where they actually landed, and here's why. There really is no beach there. It's very rocky, and so it does not correlate with the description given to us in Acts 27. And a lot of research has been done. Here's one taken from Holy Land Photos, and you can see that quite a bit of study has been done to discern exactly what's going on here. One theory that you can see there in the upper right is that there was the night anchorage in the storm, and they actually came into that slot there and encountered a beach. And if the one arrow there is pointing to Salina Bay, and it has a sandy beach on it. That is probably more likely where they came in. You can see the left of that, St. Paul's Bay, the larger opening. That's the traditional location. But research seems to favor the idea that they came in to that other bay to the right, smaller, but which contains a beach. So again, we don't know for sure, but it's interesting to at least observe the research that's been conducted. Uh, this would be a model of an ancient anchor and how they were sometimes built. Notice with wood and points on it that could grab up against the rocks and protect the wood from being split. Very, very large. And in fact, anchors have actually been brought up from the bottom of the bay or in that general region there. That doesn't mean that this is an anchor from the boat that Paul was on. It simply means that other anchors have been lost in that area for whatever reason, and so this is an anchor that would be from that general period of time, and could have been similar to the anchors that would have been used on the trip. Now, I'm just going to do a little bit of something kind of relaxing for you here. I had two students who went to Malta in 2012, and I told them to take some pictures because I would use them in Acts class. They went there to serve with the children's ministry during a missions conference being held where all the missionaries from Europe got together on the island of Malta. And these are the two gals here, and they did a great job and had a lot of fun, took some pictures there. And these are some of the pictures that they sent to us. This is the modern urban area of Malta. And again, you can see that part of the shoreline there is very rocky, not the area where Paul would have landed. And just some pictures of the urban part of that. My daughter had the privilege of visiting the island of Malta several years ago. I have never been there. I would love to be able to visit it someday. It's not all urban. You can see that there are some very beautiful, fertile regions on the island as well. And there is the traditional St. Paul's Bay with the statue there that I mentioned earlier. But as you can see, landing a ship and swimming to shore on a beach is not possible in that particular location. And then these are the gals pictured with some of the people who live on the island there. And just really special. And then in context, you can see that Malta is right below the country of Italy, island of Sicily, and gives you a little bit of perspective here. So you see they're not too far from their goal. They want to get to Rome, and in God's providence and in his mercy, he actually allows them to be stranded, at least for a little while, on an island not too far from their final destination. So on your map here, your large map, let's go ahead and add Malta. I'm sorry, Crete. That's the large island right there in the middle of your map. You see the green dot there. Remember, green dots refer to a mass of land, an island, or something like that, whereas the red ones refer to cities. So this is Crete, C-R-E-T-E. And right there on Crete, you can put the little red dot, which is Fair Havens. Fair Havens. Remember, that's where they wanted to stay, but they couldn't, or Paul wanted them to, but they couldn't because there were no conditions for wintering there. And they tried to go to Phoenix. And then go ahead and add Malta. Way over on the left side of your screen, the green dot, which again almost covers up the island. And if you look carefully, you can see that all three of those major islands that play a role in the Acts narrative are pretty much in a line. The far right there to the east, Cyprus, then in the middle there, Crete, and then to the left, to the west, is Malta. And so that, should help you to remember those three locations. All right. Well, the natives showed us unusual kindness. Again, this was a surprise because they expected to be treated probably as enemies and for the natives to take advantage of them. But they kindled a fire for them. They made us all welcome because of the rain that was falling and because of the cold. Now, one thing I should mention here is that these natives would have been called barbarians, and the word barbarian literally was an onomatopoeia, which is using the sound of something in order to create a word. They were non-Greek speaking people. So anyone that didn't speak Greek would be called a barbarian because they were considered to be just babbling, blah, 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 blah. So you get the word barbarian. And so we kind of think of the word barbarian today as being people who are uncivilized, they have no education or whatever, but that's really not what the word originally meant. In fact, these people are quite civilized. They're very hospitable, and they start a fire for them, and everybody's helping to gather sticks together to keep the fire going in the rain. And verse 3 gives us another example of God doing something unusual in this circumstance. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. Okay, now when that happens, these people who tend to be very animistic, okay, remember animism is that idea that there's spiritual presence in everybody and everything. And so when that happens, they kind of shake their heads and say, now we see what's happening. Notice verse 4. When the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, no doubt this man was a murderer whom, though he has escaped the sea, yet justice does not allow to him to live. Now, you may be using a translation that actually capitalizes the word justice because, according to some sources, there was actually a god among some of the natives, barbaric people, who was called Justice. And so some think that they're actually referring to a specific god who is meting out justice here on Paul, who is not going to get away with the murder that he's committed. There's only one problem with that. He shakes off the creature into the fire, and nothing happens to him. And so they're sitting there or standing there waiting and watching and wondering, when's this guy going to keel over and die? Obviously, this viper would have been one that was known to be especially potent. And and so they expected he would swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But after they had looked for a long time and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. And I'm reminding you here of Lystra. Remember, it was the other way around in Lystra. When he healed a man there, they immediately started worshiping him as a god until the folks from Iconium and Antioch and Pisidia came along, the Jews there, and convinced them that they were just normal men, and then they stoned them. So, it's just another reminder that animism really doesn't offer a profound basis for belief. There's just a lot of fickleness that goes on in an animistic kind of culture. And so now they think that he's a god. And of course, Paul's going to have some explaining to do. That's not recorded here, but we assume he did. In that region, there was an estate of the leading citizen of the island, whose name was Publius. He's kind of the governor of the island, if you will. And he received us and entertained us courteously for 3 days. Now, I doubt that Publius could bring 276 people into his house. A couple of ways of looking at this. One, he may have brought the leaders in. Remember the centurion and the pilot and the owner of the ship, and maybe Paul and some of his friends like Luke and Aristarchus, we don't know, into his house. It's also possible that the idea is that he arranged for housing. Not only his house, but he instructed all of the inhabitants of the island to take in 2 or 3, however many they could take in, so that all 276 would have a place of shelter. That second view is probably the one that I would prefer. It says he received us and entertained us courteously for 3 days. It doesn't say he received them into his house, okay, but I think he made arrangements for them. And the idea, I think, is that after 3 days, the rains probably stopped, and then they could make some sort of temporary shelters after that to live in until they left the island. And so now something else happens here. It happened that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and dysentery, and Paul went into him and prayed, and he laid hands on him, and he healed him. So not only do you have a miracle of Paul not being killed by a viper, but you also have a miracle of healing going on here as well. And what happens when this man is healed? Well, for at least a little while, Malta becomes the healthiest spot on planet Earth. When he had done this, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were healed. The whole island is suddenly healed of any maladies that they may be suffering. I mean, just an amazing story here. Now, we do not have record of anybody coming to Christ in this scenario. We don't read of any of the 276 on board coming to Christ. We read nothing about people on the island becoming believers. And I've sometimes wondered why. I have a hard time believing that nobody became a follower of Jesus as a result of all this. For whatever reason, Luke has not mentioned anything about that. It is possible that nobody did come to Christ. But given the presence of Paul in other places and the way God has used him, I would probably just assume that there were people that actually became followers of Christ because of everything that had happened. But Luke's intent here is not to talk about, evangelism and church planting in this particular situation, but to describe the events that secure Paul's arrival in Rome. They honored us in many ways, and when we departed, they provided such things as were necessary. So we'll come back in the next lecture and find out what happens as they plan to leave the island and move on toward Rome.